Steffy Forrester had been restless for weeks. Even though on the surface her life appeared perfect, she had her marriage to Finn, her children safe, her career at Forrester Creations thriving, and her family's power stronger than ever in Los Angeles. But deep inside, there was something gnawing at her, something she couldn't put into words, and when Rich asked her to fly to Paris to oversee an important couture preview, she jumped at the chance, not only for the prestige of representing Forrester International, but also for the distance it would give her from the constant pressures of her mother Taylor worrying about her, her father Ridge hovering with expectations, her brother Thomas throwing curveballs with hope, and of course Finn, her husband, who loved her deeply but whose lingering connection to Sheila Carter and the ongoing strain with Lee Finnegan had created tension that seemed to bubble up at every turn. And so with her sleek black suitcases packed, her children kissed, and left in the care of trusted family, and Finn giving her one of those, "I'll miss you but I trust you" embraces, she boarded the Forrester jet, not knowing that fate was about to hurl her into one of the most complicated temptations of her life, because waiting in Paris, waiting without her realizing, was Oliver Jones, the man she hadn't laid eyes on in years, the man who once made her laugh uncontrollably in Malibu, the man who once charmed his way into her bed back, when she was still figuring out who she was as a woman, and when she stepped off the runway into the electric Parisian air, the city alive with the golden glow of sunset over the Seine, she felt a strange stirring, a whisper of youth, of the past. And she thought nothing of it until the next morning, when she walked into a chic cafe near the Forrester International office and locked eyes with Oliver himself, older now, more polished, his brown hair still carrying that California surfer wave, but flecked with maturity, his jawline sharper, his smile deeper, and though years had passed since they'd shared any meaningful interaction, the recognition was instant and overwhelming, and he stood, pulling her into an embrace that caught her completely off guard, and she inhaled his cologne, something woody and warm, triggering memories of summer nights in Malibu. And in that moment, the air shifted, the city itself seemed to hush around them, and Steffi realized that Paris wasn't going to be just about fashion shows and business meetings. It was about unfinished business of the heart, and Oliver, who revealed that he was now working as a successful photographer contracted by international fashion houses, would be shooting the very Forrester preview she had come to oversee, meaning that their professional paths were about to intertwine in a way she couldn't ignore. And as they sat at that cafe table sipping espresso, catching up about careers, heartbreaks, and mutual friends, Steffi found herself leaning into the warmth of his words, remembering the playful spark he always carried, and Oliver, for his part, looked at her not as the powerful CEO-style woman she'd become but as the girl he'd once held hands with on the beach, the girl who'd let him into her life with a reckless, open heart, and the undercurrent of nostalgia was strong, intoxicating even, so strong that Steffi went back to her hotel later that evening with her pulse racing, guilty thoughts flickering through her mind about Finn, about her vows, about the home she had built in Los Angeles, but also feeling an excitement she hadn't felt in so long. The dangerous thrill of being seen by someone who wasn't her husband, someone who held no connection to Sheila, no baggage of hospital dramas or family feuds, someone who existed entirely outside the chaos of her current life. And the days that followed only worsened the temptation, because as the couture preview rehearsals kicked off, Oliver was everywhere, camera in hand, capturing her angles, teasing her with little remarks only he could deliver, and though Steffi tried to stay professional, her eyes lingered too long on his, her laughter came too quickly at his jokes, and one evening, after an exhausting day, he offered to walk her along the Seine, where they reminisced about Malibu bonfires, about the mistakes of youth, about paths not taken, and when she confessed quietly that she sometimes felt trapped by the constant battles in Los Angeles, by Finn's inability to fully separate from Sheila, by the endless Logan Forrester wars, Oliver told her she deserved more peace, more joy, more lightness, and he brushed a strand of hair from her face, his touch sparking something dangerous and forbidden inside her. And Steffi stepped back, her heart pounding, torn between loyalty and longing, between the steady devotion of Finn and the intoxicating what if of Oliver. And in that instant she knew she was standing at a crossroads that could shatter everything she had, because if she gave in, if she kissed Oliver under the Parisian moonlight, it wouldn't just be an affair. It would be a betrayal of the man who had stood by her when Sheila pulled her darkest stunts, a betrayal of her children's trust, a betrayal of the version of herself she had fought to become. But as Oliver's eyes locked with hers, filled with a softness and hunger she hadn't seen in years, Steffy couldn't help but wonder if Paris wasn't just destiny's way of tempting her but destiny's way of reminding her that she was still capable of passion that shook her to her core, passion that wasn't weighed down by trauma. And as the couture preview neared, with flashing lights, elegant gowns, and Oliver's lens always finding her, Steffy's inner conflict grew unbearable, her mind screaming Finn's name while her heart betrayed her with every stolen glance at Oliver. And though she tried to drown herself in work, in late-night calls back to Los Angeles, in reminders of the life she had, she couldn't silence the thunder inside her chest when Oliver brushed against her arm or whispered encouragement during fittings. And by the final night in Paris, when Forrester's preview had been a smashing success, the champagne flowing, the Eiffel Tower glittering against the night sky, Oliver pulled her into a quiet corner of the after-party, his eyes searching hers, his voice low as he told her he never stopped caring about her, that maybe the universe had brought them back together for a reason. And Steffy's hands trembled, her lips parted, and she found herself leaning closer, caught between past and present, between loyalty and desire, between being the woman Finn loved and the woman Oliver remembered. And the question that now haunted her was simple yet devastating. Would she cross that line? Would she let Paris become her undoing? Would she cheat on Finn with the man who represented everything wild, reckless, and free that she had once been? Or would she pull back, reclaim her strength, and leave Paris with her marriage intact, knowing that temptation tested her but didn't break her? And as the night stretched on and the music swelled, the answer balanced on the edge of a kiss that could change everything, a kiss that hovered in the space between Oliver and Steffy, a kiss that might never be forgotten no matter the choice she made, leaving her future and her marriage in peril. But Paris didn't release her so easily, because even after that night at the after-party, when Steffy almost let herself taste the forbidden kiss that lingered between her and Oliver, she carried the electricity of that near mistake back to her luxury hotel suite, her trembling fingers pressing against her lips, as if to erase the ghost of something that had never even fully happened. And she couldn't sleep, tossing and turning in silk sheets while images of Finn's smile, Hayes' giggle, and Kelly's innocent questions about her trip crashed against flashes of Oliver's intense gaze, his hand brushing hers on the cobblestone streets by the Seine. And Steffy felt caught in a vortex of memory and desire, unable to deny that Oliver awakened a part of her she had buried beneath layers of responsibility and trauma. And over the following days, though the Forrester preview had concluded, she still had business to tie up in Paris, meetings with international buyers and press, and Oliver continued to weave in and out of her schedule, sometimes coincidental, sometimes intentional, and each encounter chipped away at her resolve, leaving her wondering if Paris itself was conspiring against her, as though the city of love demanded she confront what she had never truly closed with Oliver. And one afternoon, after a long meeting, they ended up wandering into a quiet art gallery tucked away in Le Marais, where abstract paintings swirled with colors of chaos and longing, and Oliver murmured that love was like those canvases, messy, layered, impossible to interpret but impossible to deny. And Steffy felt her pulse quicken, because wasn't that what her marriage had become with Finn? A complicated painting full of dark corners, shadows of Sheila's manipulations, splashes of Lee's disapproval, strokes of loyalty and devotion, yes, but also streaks of exhaustion and cracks of distance, whereas with Oliver, in that moment, it felt like a clean brushstroke across white canvas, fresh, unburdened, a chance to feel alive again. And when he touched her hand lightly, almost imperceptibly, Steffy didn't pull away. She let it linger, let it burn, let it test her, and afterwards she berated herself silently in the hotel bathroom mirror, whispering Finn's name like a mantra, reminding herself she loved her husband, that temptation wasn't love, that history wasn't destiny. But she couldn't lie to herself. Something inside her had shifted, and she couldn't cage it. And then came the night Oliver invited her to a rooftop terrace overlooking the glittering Eiffel Tower, insisting it was just to celebrate the success of the show, insisting other colleagues would join. But when she arrived, it was only him, candles flickering in the Parisian breeze, wine uncorked, and though she wanted to turn back, to refuse the dangerous intimacy, she sat down, convincing herself she could handle it, convincing herself she could keep the line intact. And as they talked, laughter flowing more easily than it had in years, Oliver leaned closer, his voice low, confessing that seeing her again had stirred something in him, that he had thought about her more often than he admitted, that maybe he was foolish, but he believed they still had a connection that transcended time and distance. And Steffy, drunk on the romance of the night, drunk on the city itself, felt her defenses crumbling, her lips parting, her body leaning, until her phone buzzed suddenly with a video call from Finn, his face lighting up the screen as Hayes babbled beside him. And in that exact moment, Steffy's world snapped back into focus, the guilt flooding her so hard it nearly knocked her breath away, and she excused herself from Oliver, tears in her eyes as she realized how close she had come to obliterating everything she had built. But instead of retreating completely, she returned the next day, pulled again into Oliver's orbit like a moth to flame, and the dangerous dance continued, one step forward into temptation, one step back into loyalty, until even Steffy didn't recognize herself, and the question became not whether she could resist forever, but how much damage she would cause if she slipped even once, because Paris was a city of shadows and whispers, and secrets born there had a way of traveling home. And Steffy knew deep down that if she cheated, if she surrendered to Oliver even for a fleeting night, the truth would eventually come crashing into Los Angeles, into Finn's arms, into Ridge's pride, into Taylor's protective love, into Lee's judgment, into Sheila's opportunistic glee, and into Hope's quiet, cutting satisfaction. And that knowledge haunted her as she stood on the edge of betrayal, knowing one wrong move could destroy everything. And yet the tug-of-war inside Steffy only grew more vicious as the Paris trip stretched on. Because no matter how many times she told herself she had pulled back in time, no matter how many times she stared at the wedding ring Finn had slipped on her finger, and whispered under her breath that she would never betray him, Oliver remained like a phantom in her mind, a siren call that she could not silence, his laughter echoing when she lay awake at night, his face flashing before her eyes when she tried to focus on work. And the longer she lingered in Paris, the more the city itself seemed to conspire against her, presenting moments that felt ripped from some forbidden romance novel. The sudden downpour that left them huddled beneath the same umbrella, their shoulders pressed close, the long limousine ride to a buyer's dinner where the champagne flowed and the leather seat between them felt like an impossible chasm she wanted to cross. The late-night stroll past lovers kissing on bridges, where Oliver teased that maybe Paris wasn't safe for her if she wasn't ready to risk temptation. And Steffy laughed nervously, but inside she trembled, because she knew he was right, knew she was playing with fire, and part of her wanted to burn, because hadn't she always been the one to live on the edge, to chase adrenaline, to embrace the wild? But this wasn't the motorbike riding, cliff-jumping Steffy of old. This was the woman who had fought her way back from grief, who had chosen stability with Finn over chaos with Liam, who had sworn she would never let anyone, including herself, threaten the safe haven she had built for her children. And still, when Oliver leaned in close during a whispered conversation after a long day of press interviews, telling her that he still thought about that night years ago when they had kissed under a Malibu sunset, she felt her lips quiver with the memory, and before she knew it, their mouths were inches apart, the air electric, and she had to physically push back, gasping that she couldn't do this, that she was married, that she loved Finn, and Oliver, to his credit, apologized, but the damage was done, because that near kiss hung in the air, haunting her every moment after, until even Steffy began to wonder if maybe she had already crossed a line simply by wanting, by imagining, by letting the fantasy of Oliver grow so vivid in her mind. And her guilt became unbearable, pouring out in frantic phone calls home where she overcompensated with Finn, telling him how much she loved him, how much she missed him, and Finn, trusting as ever, smiled warmly, never suspecting the storm brewing beneath her words, never imagining that his wife was standing in Paris at the edge of betrayal, and Steffy, staring at his face on the glowing phone screen, felt the crushing weight of her choices, knowing that if she faltered, if she let Paris swallow her whole, she wouldn't just hurt Finn, she would devastate the foundation of her family. And yet even with that awareness, even with every reason to run, she found herself one night agreeing to meet Oliver at a quiet jazz club in Montmartre, telling herself it was harmless, just two old friends closing a chapter, but deep down, she knew she was lying, because no part of her wanted closure. What she wanted was the dangerous, reckless taste of what if, the intoxicating brush with a past that still called her name. And as the music swelled, and Oliver's hand rested over hers on the table, and the city hummed with romance all around them, Steffy felt herself teetering again on that razor's edge between loyalty and desire, knowing that one choice in Paris could follow her forever back to Los Angeles, back to Finn, back to a marriage that might never recover from the truth. And so the nights in Paris blurred together, each one a delicate tightrope between desire and restraint, as Steffy found herself unable to escape Oliver's gravity, his presence an intoxicating pulse at the edge of her consciousness, whether she was reviewing sketches in her hotel suite, walking along the Seine under the glow of streetlights, or attending exclusive Forrester dinners where his camera never left her face. And the more she resisted, the more the tension between them became unbearable, because Oliver had a way of seeing her that Finn never could, not out of lack of love, but because Finn's devotion was steady and safe, and Oliver's attention was unpredictable, wild, thrilling, a reminder of the girl she used to be before the weight of responsibility and tragedy had hardened her. And it wasn't just physical. It was the way he remembered the smallest details about her, the way he teased her about her favorite childhood desserts, the way he recalled the exact spot on the beach where she had confessed her first heartbreak. And Steffy, who had always prided herself on control, began to realize she had none when it came to him, because every laugh, every brush of his hand against hers, every lingering glance, sent sparks through her that she couldn't extinguish. And as the final evening of her Paris trip approached, the crescendo of temptation became almost unbearable, with Oliver inviting her to a private dinner in a hidden courtyard lit by fairy lights and the warm glow of candles, telling her that he wanted to celebrate the successful conclusion of the Forrester preview. And Steffy, heart-hammering, reminded herself that she had promised Finn she would return home, that she loved him, that Hayes and Kelly needed her, that her children deserved her loyalty. But when Oliver opened the dinner with that disarming smile, when he reached across the table and brushed a loose strand of hair from her cheek, when he murmured softly that she had always been unforgettable to him, the words melting against the fragile armor she had built around her heart, Steffy felt herself trembling, caught in a maelstrom of emotion she could neither control nor name. And despite the alarms ringing in her mind, despite the phone calls she had planned to Finn that night to reassure herself and him, despite every principle she had ever sworn to uphold, she found herself leaning closer to Oliver, tasting the electricity between them, allowing a whisper of the forbidden to caress her lips. And for a fleeting moment, it felt as though time had stopped, as though the city itself had conspired to hold them suspended in a bubble where only the two of them existed. And the rational part of her screamed that this was madness, that 1 second of surrender could destroy the life she had built, that her marriage, her children, her family's respect, everything she held dear could vanish if she gave in. But the reckless, unburdened part of her, the part that had once stolen kisses in Malibu, that had once lived without fear of consequences, took over. And in that moment, as the candles flickered and the night wrapped around them like velvet, Steffy found herself crossing the line she had fought to protect for so long, her lips meeting Oliver's in a kiss that was both desperate and tender, a kiss that spoke of years of longing, of temptation, of regret and desire. And in that instant, the Paris skyline faded into insignificance, the echo of her own heartbeat louder than the city itself, because she knew she had betrayed Finn, even as a part of her thrilled at the taste of forbidden freedom. And the hours that followed were a dizzying blur of whispered confessions, hesitant touches, and stolen moments in the shadowed corners of Parisian streets and hidden hotel rooms, each second embedding a memory that would haunt her forever. And yet even as she gave herself over to Oliver, guilt clawed at her insides, because every time she imagined Finn smiling at her in Los Angeles, every time she thought of Hayes asking when Mommy would be home, every time she pictured Kelly looking up to her, she felt a hollow ache, a cruel reminder that pleasure came at a devastating cost. And so she oscillated between the rapture of being desired by someone who reminded her of a younger, wilder self and the crushing weight of knowing she had betrayed the man who loved her. And this conflict reached a fever pitch when, in the early hours before dawn, they stood on a balcony, overlooking the twinkling lights of Paris, the cool breeze mixing with the heat between them. And Oliver whispered that maybe she could have both worlds, Maybe she could find a way to be happy without consequence. And Steffy, exhausted, elated, terrified, realized that the choices she had made were no longer theoretical. They were real, irreversible, and would follow her back across the Atlantic. And she knew with a sinking certainty that when she returned to Los Angeles, nothing would ever be the same, that Finn might never see her the same way again, that Ridge and Taylor might never trust her fully, that the fragile balance of her family could shatter if even a hint of this betrayal leaked. And yet, for the first time in years, she felt fully alive, fully herself, a woman who had tasted passion, desire, and the consequences of giving in. And as she closed her eyes against the Parisian dawn, she understood that love, loyalty, and temptation were tangled in a web she could not untangle, and that the story of her life had taken a turn she could neither undo nor ignore, setting the stage for the inevitable reckoning awaiting her back home.